is my other task is to introduce our speaker for today. So thank you all for joining us. Chris and I, when we were talking about what would be a good topic for this this session, said, well, you know, the AP exam is kind of right around the corner now, and this is when we have a lot of AP teachers that participate in our K-12 chat, and so we thought this might be a good time to talk about the kinds of things that that teachers are doing to help students prepare for and review for the exam. So we asked Amy. Amy's you may have recognized Amy because she's a often participant in our K-12 chats over the last couple of years. And Amy's is an AP statistics teacher at Brooklyn Technical High School in New York City. She's also been involved in AP for as long as I can remember, and I've been involved since the beginning, but my memory is not all that good anymore. So I can't vouch for exactly when, but she's been involved with AP statistics for a very long time. And she's also currently a member of the ASA and CTM Joint Committee on K-12 statistics. And so she brings a variety of perspectives. And I'm going to turn things over to Amy and let her take it away. She's going to talk a little bit about that. And then at the end, we hope to have some time for people to share their own thoughts on what they're doing to prepare students or ideas that they have for review. So Amy, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Roxy. I just wanted to say hello. And as Roxy said, I'm at Brooklyn Tech. I'm actually in my colleague's classroom right now. I wanted just to take a minute and maybe have each of you say your name, say where you teach, and maybe what you teach, just so we can say hi to each other. Sandra, do you want to start?
Hi, my name is Sandra Pullen. I teach at East Meadow High School. And actually, my son-in-law works at Brooklyn Tech. Do you know Andrew Brickman? And I've been teaching AP statistics for 12 years. And I love the course. I also teach Algebra 2 Honors and Algebra 2 Regents. So I enjoy the course, and I'll pass it on to the next person.
Maybe Laura.
I'm Laura Peterson, and I teach in Utah at Ridgeline High School. So just always looking for new ways to help my AP kids.
And Laura, do you only teach AP stats, or do you have other subjects that you teach?
I teach AP calculus as well, and then some concurrent enrollment stats and math 1050 pre-algebra. I mean pre-calculus.
Michael.
Hello, I'm Michael, and I've been teaching AP statistics for 26 years now.
Thanks.
For many of those years, I taught AP calculus, but now they have me mostly teaching computer science. So I teach AP Computer Science A and a couple of other computer science courses. And the last math course that I'm still teaching, or at least in the math department, is AP Stat. But I love AP Stat. And I've got a small class this year, but trying to get them ready for the AP exam. So looking forward to all your hints and suggestions.
And Michael, where do you teach again?
Oh, sorry, St. Albans, which is a boys' school and boys' independent school in Washington, D.C., right next to the National Cathedral.
All right, Lee.
I don't know who you called on next, but yes, okay. I just got home from work. I teach at Moravian Academy in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. This year I have 2 sections of AP Stat. I also am teaching Prob Stat, which is the non-AP course, which has a lot of flexibility for projects and things like that, and pre-calculus. And I've been grading the AP Stat exam since 2010, so I don't know when I actually started teaching it, but obviously before 2010. And I actually stepped into this role in January. I went from teaching at a university for a couple of years to this role, and they were definitely behind. We will be reviewing on May 1st and 2nd for the exam. That is it. We are actually doing the probability unit and geometric and binomial next week. It's a whirlwind.
Sounds like it. Matthew.
Hi, Matthew Schlegel. I teach teaching at Burlington Township, New Jersey. Been teaching AP Stat for 20 years, and I also teach Prob Stat. It's the first time actually this year.
And Justin?
Oh, hello, hello. I'm Justin Corey, and I teach in Greenville at the South Carolina Governor's School for Arts and Humanities, and which is a public boarding school. And so interested in seeing what to do with the students, after all these exams I'm going to be taking, but help out with the AP classes because I mostly teach the non-AP, just Algebra 2 and probability statistics and all the kinds of things, but just those little boarding school for art students. So trying to make sure they're can be okay.
Sounds good. You guys don't need my help, it sounds like, but here we go. All right. So I'm gonna just talk a little. First of all, if you guys need to get a hold of me, this email address is a great way to get a hold of me. I know that Chris included my Twitter handle. I'm really not on Twitter all that much anymore, so you'll probably have better luck just emailing me directly. So I want to talk a little bit about how I think about review in general, which is greatly influenced by this book that I read many years ago now, called Make It Stick. And Make It Stick really emphasizes this idea to mix up, topics and just to think a little bit about making things more about recall and recognition than just telling kids what they're going to be talking about. Making the practice that you do frequent, and I like the word effortful. I think that's really nice. Spaced out over time so that it's not overwhelming. And so for people like Lee, maybe that spaced out over time might be a little shorter period of time. It gives students opportunity to generate ideas, reflect on mistakes, and be challenged. So my students right now are practicing and they're getting feedback right away about things that they feel comfortable with and don't feel comfortable with. And that's part of the process. And of course, I make sure that we're praising effort and perseverance, especially when students have little slip-ups here and there. So that's really kind of influenced the way that I review, but also the way that I teach in general. So of course we have the exam is coming up pretty quickly on May 7th. Some people are taking the late exam, and just go over the format in case people need a refresher. We have 40 multiple choice in first section, which is 90 minutes. And then we have section 2, which is the 5 free response questions. And the last question is the investigative task. And as of 2019, they have a very nice formula sheet and of course the reference tables. And more recently, again, they've specified which questions are going to be which topics. So the first question is going to be on collecting data. So that's essentially section 3, or unit 3, I guess is we're calling it in the CED. And then one question is going to be on exploring data, which is section 1 and section 2, I guess, or maybe the other way around, I can't remember. And then we have a question on probability and sampling distributions, which is units 4 and 5. And then for sure a question on inference. And then they have this sort of multi-topic question, which is 2 or more skills. And then of course the investigative task, which is a question that I really enjoy, that really enhances the curriculum by having students just step outside the comfort zone in terms of content and applications, and really rewards creativity as well. So in my humble opinion, you can review in a lot of different ways and make it effective. And so I think of there being kind of 5 different ways to have review. You have, the format of the exam and making sure kids feel comfortable with what they're going to see when they get to the test. Of course, you have content review, different types of questions, and having them comfortable with the different types of questions, having them comfortable with the types of communication that they're going to be doing, and then review about how to use the tools at hand, and especially the calculators that they are allowed to use. So I give either one of these things. Most often I've been giving kind of a practice exam, which is like an abbreviated exam, or many teachers give a mock exam, which is a full set of questions just to get the comfort down of the exam. So like I said, I've been focusing a little bit about just doing something a little bit more abbreviated, because then I can do it in class. And I usually do the free response and the task first, and then over the course of 2 days, and then I'll give them 20 multiple choice. And what I like to do is usually I'll take the multiple choice from one exam, and just every other question I pick which one I remove, so that it kind of spans the whole from 1 to 40 in some way, and not and it's not just like the first half of the exam. So taking a practice test also is nice for students to be able to assess their weaknesses and places to grow. So I think that there is a practice exam that you can assign your students on AP Classroom, and I know that there's multiple choice and also free response. And then also the exam will for multiple choice, for example, will give them feedback right away. I think for the free response, I'm not sure if they get the feedback without you scoring it first. AP Daily videos have been happening for the last 2 years. So already on the YouTube channel for College Board, there's videos from last year and the year before, and they'll be starting for the 2024 on April 22nd. And I think what I really like about the AP Daily videos is they kind of like what I suggested in the beginning, that they break it down into the different components of the exam, as well as the different topics and content areas of the exam. The presenters are Luke Wilcox and Darren Starnes, and I think that they do a really nice job presenting typical problems, explaining them well, and they also allow the students to download the problems so that they can work on the problems before they watch the video, or concurrently, so they can stop, they can always go back, and they're short enough that they're not too onerous for the kids. So there's going to be one every day. I want to say 7 or 8 days is what they're doing. I also really like the Against All Odds videos. If you just Google Against All Odds, this is, I think, mostly meant for the college level, but it definitely has videos that apply to the high school AP Stats curriculum, or even non-AP curriculum. And I really like the way that they're laid out. The same idea is why I like the AP Daily videos, is that they have a very clear objective going over a content. They give really interesting examples. And they also do have some worksheets that you can download so that the students can explore. But I don't assign those. I think that they're just great for the content review. You can have your students create a graphic organizer for each unit or chapter. Some of my really creative students do a nice job with those. And then another fun way is having students write an original problem. So having them think about, create even the numbers, create the scenario, and then write an original problem as a way to review. If you want to make it a little spicier, you can also add constraints. So sometimes for an inference problem, I'll say, I'll specify a sample size or a range of a sample size, or I'll specify a p-value interval that it has to be between a p-value of this and this. Some constraints might make it a little bit more challenging. Larry Green has a website called Categorizing Statistics Problems, and this is a website that has the options for students to just classify the type of inference. So the scenarios are very short. Sometimes they don't even have data in them. And the students have to select which inference procedure is being summarized in that problem. And it kind of gives really fun feedback. Like I'll say, no, this is only one sample if they get it wrong, and then they can try again. And I don't want to say it's an exhaustive list of scenarios, but it doesn't, you sometimes get to the point where you say, wow, this guy really has made a lot of these scenarios. They're fun. And then, of course, the classic, some students really do enjoy getting a review book. They like to have something solid with them. There's, of course, digital formats of these review books for the most part, Kindle, and then many students can buy them used. And I personally like the Barron's book. I think that Marty does a really good job creating multiple choice questions that do a good job of kind of mimicking the content. And I also like that he has added a section on social justice problems that kind of have a summarizing effect of some of the topics. So that's something you can do after the AP as well with those problems. And then Stats Medic does a review course. They're charging $29 for the students, which I think is pretty reasonable. It's mostly video based and electronic, and same thing, they go through the different content and the different types of questions, and so students can go at their own pace if they want to. And then of course the free result that you have access to if you're an AP teacher is AP Classroom. This is probably even more at this point. There's over 500 multiple choice problems and more practice questions. Some of them are for teacher use only, so you can print them out and use them in your classroom, and as long as students don't take them home. And so the interface looks much like this. You can give questions that are based on a particular type, exam alignment, you can make sure that it's a question that matches the exam. And then especially if you're giving students access like at home, there's the publicly available questions, and then you can pick the unit and the topic and have students practice that way. And I also think that there is some practice, as I said before, there's some practice questions that you can then assign that were like a practice test, I want to say from like 2008 or something like that. A little bit outdated, but the questions are still good. So something I like to do in my classroom every day are what we call in my school power quizzes. And it's not about power, which is what my students thought it was at the beginning, but they're mostly just short. So that's why we call them power quizzes. I give 5 questions each, and I try to do some group work and some individual so that they can work together. And when I do the quizzes for the groups, this is how I do it. So you'll see that there's a section here for which number of the practice booklet that I have. So usually, we'll do, 6 through 10. And I give my students a first attempt to get it right. And then if for some reason they can't get it on the first attempt, I give them 2 more attempts to try to get it. And the thing about these group power quizzes is that the engagement is always very high, because they're having really rich discussions about why certain question choices are not correct or are correct, and they're really working hard to try to explain things to each other and convince each other of the correct answers. And I do this without notes or anything like that. So they're really getting kind of a feel for what these questions feel like, but in a slightly more collaborative environment. And then I do some that are also individual, just to give students a bite-size practice. And they end up really liking them, to be honest. And we do so many of them that they end up feeling that it helps them practice the type of sort of pacing that they will need for the questions. So again, the other thing that you can do besides those power quizzes is Barron's also has the flashcards. So like, I know some people that just like pick out a flashcard every day and they start the class with a flashcard. But the big idea is having students do mixed practice to practice the recognition and recall. And that's what I really like the multiple choice practice for, is that it's practicing vocabulary and mechanics and, you know, abstract thinking, and not so much communication, but it really does help kind of, you know, spark the memory. And then of course you can have past free response and maybe a task, focusing of course on the communication that's going to be appropriate to meet the requirements to get, you know, the, you know, E's and P's and I's for each of these questions. And you can do the same thing. You can do group free response questions, or you can do individual practicing, giving them some feedback. And I really like lately that the rubrics have intent of question, they have a model solution, and they have the scoring rubrics. And it's nice for students to see these so that they can kind of get an idea of what the readers are going to be looking for, and also importantly, what is getting emphasized. And usually it's, you know, things like context and citing evidence and, you know, making a strong argument rather than a weak argument. So for some students, that's been really eye-opening. And one of the things I like to do is, you know, I have a curated list of free response questions that I assign my students. And I say, look, if you don't know where to start here. And if you can review these questions, you know, I pick questions that go through the whole curriculum, and so that they can then have a foundation of where they start and if they want to go further. And then usually what I do is I give my students that their test is like, I pick, you know, a few of these questions, you know, so that they're getting the feedback from me on a few of these questions as well. But if you don't know where to start, sometimes you can borrow a list like this from somebody. And so Michael Torres has a Desmos version of some of the AP Stat FRQ. And let me see if I can find my notes. Otherwise, I will share it somehow. How do I? Let's see. I'm a little. Yeah. Let me see if I can get this in the chat. You can play around with this Desmos. And then there's planner response, you know, so same idea, you know, as kind of Larry Green's website, you can give the free response, just the question, and have students talk out what they would write, you know, what procedure or what function on the calculator, or, you know, thinking a little bit about just kind of planning. And it ends up being kind of nice sometimes if you don't want the kids to just write and just have them talk it out. And then same thing, you know, sometimes you can give just the stem of the question and then say, what questions could we ask if this is the information that you're being given? That's a nice little twist that I haven't actually done in a while, but might go back to it. And again, the big idea here is, you know, getting comfortable with providing evidence and justifications, you know, so that their responses are complete according to the rubrics that we've been seeing and anticipate. Bob Lachelle has a assemble the model solution, and I don't know how many he has on this, but I think it's still active. I tried really hard to make sure that these links were still active. But basically he has this Desmos builder where some of the phrases are not part of the actual solution. And so, you know, they're little distractor phrases. And so the students have to pick which of these phrases would go with the complete solution. And that's kind of a nice way to think about the communication. And then sometimes I give a question and I just make up student responses. And I ask the students to grade according to a rubric, or think a little bit about which responses. And usually we, you know, have them up around the classroom of, you know, all the same question, but different types of responses for that one question. And then having the students go through the rubrics and thinking about what question, what grading would be appropriate for that. And so again, the big idea is, answer the question and then stop thinking a little bit about which language to use to convey the responses that the students are getting. Oh yeah, so Lee's saying you have, is this the same link, Lee, or is it different?
I didn't actually click on your link, so I'm not sure if it's the same link or if it's different. But the activities that you were describing were not the same as the ones that Bob and I did.
Okay.
So
well,
yeah, so there's like one activity in that collection that is specifically on regression, where the students are given a solution, a sample student solution, and they have to identify what's wrong with it. And then there's a little video that plays on the next screen that describes what's wrong with it and what should have been there, that sort of thing. So they have to kind of think about what might be missing first. There's also in that collection one where there's different scenarios, kind of like the Larry Green website, where you have to choose which one it is. And of course, at the end, there's, some feedback so they can kind of figure out if they got it right or not. So great, like if our exam was the second week and you were trying to figure out things to do that the students could do individually, because, some students are there for certain exams and not for others. And you don't know who's going to be in your class, in the week leading up to the AP exam. That was great to use for that. But now that the exam is the second day of exams, that might not work out as well. But I mean, there's still, you can decide all of them individually and students can pick and choose which ones they want to work on.
Yeah, as Sandra and I were saying, though, we have spring break is starting on Saturday. So it's, hopefully I'll post a few things for my students to work on if they, if they are able. Some of them obviously will not, but I don't want to leave them without anything to do. All right. And then lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Open Intro YouTube videos. They have really great videos for the TI and the Casio calculators. And I actually solely use these videos. I think that they're fantastic, especially because I have students with different calculators in my classroom, and it seems unfair, to have one student listening to the explanation of how to use their classmate's calculator when it doesn't apply to them. And then for those students who have a TI-89 or forget what the other ones are, HPs, they have mixed reviews about the videos that are available, but hopefully someday they'll be consistent videos. StatsMedic also has a nice calculator practice, I think, available on their website. And the big idea here is, calculator talk does not equal showing work, as my students are learning sometimes the hard way. But it is the tool that they have available to them throughout the entire AP exam. And so it's really nice if they do know how to use that. Okay. So that's about the end of my presentation. If anybody has questions or other contributions, since you guys have been teaching stats for so long.
I have a question. Amy, you've been a reader a number of times, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I went to an AP conference some years ago, and the speaker made a number of points, but one of them that really kind of stuck in my throat was one where he said that in any question, in any free response question that requires you to compare two things, for example, here's a distribution of student heights in school A, here's a distribution of student heights in school B, compare the two distributions. He said that you would not receive full credit for saying the mean of distribution A is 68 inches and the mean of distribution B is 69.4 inches. You actually have to say the mean of distribution B is 69.4 inches, which is greater than that of distribution A. Is that still a guiding principle of comparison questions?
That is a great, and actually, I feel like, I think that comparison is one of the very big overarching themes of the AP statistics course. It's not just in Unit 1 when you're comparing distributions with centers or spreads or whatever. If you really think about it, anytime you have two samples, you're comparing those samples. And so, for example, if you are doing a confidence interval for the difference of two means, you can say, for example, we are 95% confident that, the mean score for Miss Hogan's students is going to be between this value and this value greater than for another teacher's students, and that's still a comparative idea. So yeah, the comparative language is something like, yeah, you can state what those items are, but if you're comparing, you're going to say, this one is more, this one's funnier, this one's happier. And then also, if you're given two choices, which one do you pick? Well, pick one, first of all, and then tell me why you like that one better. And that's also a comparative, right? Why do I like this one better? I like distribution A better because, and then insert the comparative language, right?
Standard deviation is smaller.
Well, yeah, but like, why would that be better? So, but always when you're given two choices, pick one. And then tell me why you picked that one. And it's like, why do I like the one that I picked? And why do I not like the one I didn't pick? Or even better, why do I like the one I picked better than the other one I didn't pick?
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
And I think that's a good principle. I mean, some of the things that are emphasized in this course are good principles for providing evidence for an argument. It's not just about being good on the AP stats exam. That's a great way to emphasize a good argument. I like this one better. Why? Okay. Roxy, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say that the pick one is really important because sometimes students will say, well, it could be A because this, and this, but it could, or B because this, and this, and they haven't really made a choice. And sometimes that's also considered if students do parallel solutions, like if they give two solutions to the same problem, then they need to, and they get different answers, different answers. They need to pick one and cross the other one out because the other thing that's used is if there are two solutions and one is not clearly indicated, the weaker solution is graded. So don't try two things and just say, well, one of these is probably right, so I'm going to put them both down, because then one of them may be right, but the other one's the one that's going to get graded.
And also, it's a waste of time. This is a time test. So I think what's nice is that we're emphasizing to students, look, make a decision when you're trying to answer this question, make a decision. And I like the way one of my colleagues phrases it, start answering the question with the very first word. Don't hem and haw, repeating the question, that's wasting time. Answer the question right away.
Some of my students have been taught by their English teachers to rephrase the stem of the question. I always tell them, no, bullet lists are fine. Sentence fragments are fine. Get to the point.
Correct. And honestly, the other thing to think about, and this is something that students don't think about, pretend you are the reader's last paper on the last day, and you want to make their lives easier rather than harder. So, and the other thing my students do that drives me crazy is they say things that they don't need to. And then of course, then they make a mistake someplace in there, and that something is still related to what they're being asked about. So then they turn themselves around and I don't know, they get points off for something that, yeah, like as Lee's saying, like you don't need to fill the entire white space. I think that they've done a little bit of a better job parsing it up without having just like oodles and oodles of space. But, I like it when students do a good job answering a question with the least amount of words. It's sufficient, but detailed.
Yeah, it's read the question, answer the question, and then stop.
And then
Because,
bye.
yeah, because often they'll answer the question correctly, but then they'll go on and say something that somehow contradicts what they've said, or that is so egregiously wrong that, so, once you've answered the question, stop. Yeah.
Now,
I
on the other hand, here's what I will say is that what students, I do think that students can maximize working with the language that's in the problem. So, for example, like in an inference problem, usually the parameter is specified for them, and they should take that parameter right from the problem. There's no creativity involved. It's not like the creative writing, like you were talking about, Michael. There's no brownie points for making it zazzier. Like just use what it's talking about in the problem, and make sure that you're getting, the parameter and the context and the population or whatever it is in the question. And so just use the language in the problem, and usually that's sufficient. Sandra, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
It was on a different topic. I find that my students struggle with the investigative task. And part of it is I'm trying to power through the curriculum. And so I save the investigative task for the end of the year after, because I find that because it's so integrated with so many different topics and you have to think out of the box. And my population who takes the class, I can have weak students along with top students in the same class. The strong students can get things very quickly, but the weaker students really have trouble with the investigative tasks. What strategies have you used to help students become more comfortable with that task?
So I don't think that you can teach the investigative task, because it's always going to be something outside the curriculum or something twisty and turny that I might not have thought of to teach. Now, occasionally, P.S., it is something that I did teach just because I like the topic. I remember the year that it was about Simpson's paradox, and my students were like, "But you taught that. You taught that." And I was like, "I know, I understand, but oftentimes it's not." Like I was telling Roxy about the one that I gave my students the other day, which was a chi-square test for variance, which is a very interesting investigative task. And I find it to be very approachable in a very weird way if you have a leap of faith. So I think that the thing you have to have students get comfortable with is that they're constantly doing things that is a little bit outside of their comfort zone, and having to do things on their own that's a little bit outside of their comfort zone. So having kids explore things that pushes them a little bit that wasn't in the textbook, asking questions constantly that's not something they would have had in the textbook, or having them do things a little bit more exploratory. You're having them explore a little bit, like, well, what if we did this? And then have them explore that and have them get comfortable, because part of it is they psych themselves out. They really do. So for example, a chi-square test for variance, they know a chi-square, theoretically, they know variance, they've never seen those two things together. And the task is really meant to lead them through that process in a loving, but maybe scary way. And so they have to have faith. And I think that students who get really psyched out about those problems, they tend to like panic over those problems. And the other thing I think that students do mistakenly is that they leave it till the end when they're tired. And so then it's like a really onerous task. They've done 5 problems and now they're on the 6th one. And wow, this 6th one is like crazy, crazy bananas. So I also encourage students to not do it last. I encourage them to do, 1 or 2 problems of the free response, and then hit the task. I also recommend to spend up to 30 minutes. I know that's wild, but sometimes you need a minute or 2 just to digest what the problem is asking. And then on top of it, the first part, at least, is usually something they should know. So they should at least get it started. And then they can always, come back to it if they have time, or But it really is a leap of faith, and you have to have kids know that if they just go with the wild ride, oftentimes they do, they can do pretty well.
And you mentioned the need to leave it to the end of the year so that they will have all the different tools that they might use to address, but you can also kind of integrate it earlier in the year by just doing things that are in the curriculum, but you haven't covered yet. So in regression, you could actually ask an investigative task-like problem about the effect of outliers or something like that. You're going to get there. But at that point, it's an investigative task for them because it's building on what they already have. So this idea of being asked questions about something they haven't yet seen, but maybe could figure out, and then it also sets you up for when you get there. That's another thought.
Can I add something to the conversation? So I tell my students, just in working with the free response questions in general, they're probably going to get stuck somewhere with something, right? They'll calculate a probability and they'll be like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. My probability is more than one, right? I don't know what I did wrong, right? So I tell them to make sure they write notes to themselves, on the exam, maybe for that question that they're thinking the answer isn't reasonable, like it doesn't match my shaded normal distribution. I know the probability should be more than 50%. If they can't figure out what they did wrong, to just make a note, like, okay to here, just draw a little arrow so they know where to get started when they go back into that problem, so they don't have to go back to the top thinking process again. So just like leaving them notes so that they can get back into a problem when they have to, leave it and go back into it, is a good idea. I know I actually gave my students a set of 6 questions and encourage them, like we practiced in class. I give them a full exam of 6 free response questions. And I say, okay, you're going to take 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes, just to scan through them and decide what order you would do those questions in. And then I kind of poll the students, which one would you do first, second, third? And there's no right or wrong answer to what you would do first, second, or third. But different students do have different responses to that. But none of them, based on my prompting, leave question 6 for the very end. They typically will do something they feel comfortable with first, like, oh, I recognize this, I'll do that and knock that one out. And then they might go to the investigative task, go back to another one. It's really counterintuitive because the students are so used to, like, I need to start with question 1 and then go to question 2 and then go to question 3. And there are some students that are really structured like that. So it's kind of challenging for them to think differently. But I think once they realize, oh, not everybody's starting with question 1, some people are starting with question 3, like that's actually good for them to hear that and realize that, hey, it's okay. You don't have to start with a specific question.
Yeah, and the other thing, I know this is not like something that I would, encourage students to do all the time, but there is something to be said. I tell students all the time, just pick something that you think is right and go with it and continue on, like even if, so like, especially in a multi-part question, A, B, and C, right? I've graded so many questions where part A is being used in part B or in part D or whatever. And they get really panicky, like, oh, if this is not right, then, my answers for these other ones aren't going to be right. And, what they have to realize is that the graders are going to take into account after part A for the most part, right? If that one's not right, but you do correct things after that, you're not going to get double dinged, right? So I've never seen a rubric that will, you get penalized multiple times for something wrong. So they just have to have faith or sort of like get over it that they didn't know how to do something in part A correctly. And if all else fails, make up an answer, make up something that you think is reasonable so that you can do, because maybe I didn't know how to do part B, A or B, but I definitely knew how to do part C. And I just tell them, then do what you can with part B so that you can show what you know. And really, truly, like I find that kids, they stop and then they get stuck. And kind of like what Leah's saying, like there's going to be something there that you go, ooh, I didn't know this so well. And carry on, move on. You don't need to get 100 to get a good score. You you have to understand that, there are problems that you know how to do well, and you should focus on the things that you know how to do well. If there's one or two parts that you didn't know how to do well, it's going to come out in the wash and you need to just move on. So really pacing is key. Those 90 minutes go by so fast when you have those 6 questions or even the 40 multiple choice. You know, if you're getting hung up on one multiple choice, that's that's terrible. Just move on, guess, and again, make a little note in your booklet. They can write all over these booklets and move on and come back to it if you have time. That one question, that one part is, I don't want to say it's insignificant, but if they really go through and show what they know, it's going to be better for them.
I have a kind of a picky specific question. On the formula sheet, there's a formula for the standard error of the regression slope, S sub B.
No one's ever
And
going to use that.
I have never seen it used ever.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
I
Just
can
wanted
tell
to make sure as I was on safe ground by saying to my students, don't worry about this one.
Yeah.
I teach them use B over T instead, because that will produce the same result. And if that's the missing ingredient in one of those printout problems where they say, well, what is the standard error of the slope? Well, if you know T and you know the slope itself, you can reverse engineer it.
I feel like I actually don't have my students do any data input for regression. I think it's a waste of energy. I just don't feel like, I mean, because if you make one data entry error, then nothing is going to be right, and then you're not testing for statistics, you're testing for data entry. So I often just give my students the computer output like they might see on an exam or in a textbook, and have them go with that. And they should know what each of the items is. And of course, the format isn't going to match exactly, but they need to kind of have a general understanding of what computer outputs in general might have, and even for all the other inference procedures. I've seen that where they've done the output with the statistic and the p-value and a lot of other things. So
Yeah, I think the when the exam is written, they're conscious of the fact that students have limited time, and they're not, I can't imagine that they would ever expect students to input a large data set. And it just makes you cry sometimes when you see students where they specifically have not given the data so that you can't do that. And they'll try and read the data off a scatter plot so they can put it in their calculator. And, they just have to know that's not what they would have been expected to do. So.
I also just think that I don't, the very first activity I give my students, there's no data entry whatsoever. I give them all the numbers they could possibly want. Why? Because I want them thinking right away. That otherwise, what they're going to take half an hour to enter the data. It's you want students thinking right away. It's not AP data entry, it's AP statistics, right? So, is it nice to know how you enter things into a calculator? Yes, but I don't know.
Any other thoughts, or anybody have anything that they do to review that they would like to share with the group that they think works well for their students, or just general advice, exam taking advice for their students?
Do you happen to have the link for the Larry Green site? I'm familiar with a similar one that was put together by Lake Tahoe Community College.
I think that's his.
I think that's
You
the same
think
one.
that's his? Okay, same one. All right.
Yeah.
There are a few wrong answers in there, but the vast majority of them are correct. And my students just love playing that game.
That's how you know things are homemade. If there's not a typo in my test someplace somewhere, it didn't happen, right? I think that's part of the charm, to be honest with you. I hope he doesn't even make it snazzier or anything. I think that really is part of the charm.
We really enjoy that website. And next year I'm going to do an investigative task to have them estimate how many questions are in his pool, because sometimes you get a close repeat, and if they're independently chosen, you could actually figure out how many are in the pool.
Capture, recapture.
That would be,
Exactly.
that would be a fun question, on the investigative task for real. Let's get some people to do that.
All right. Any other thoughts, comments? All right. Well, if there's no other thoughts or comments, I want to thank Amy for sharing her her thoughts on exam review with us, and really appreciate it. We anticipate we'll probably have one more K-12 chat next month before the end of the school year. And so watch for a notice on that. And for those two of you that are in New York and have very late spring breaks, enjoy your spring break. So, all right. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. It was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you, Amy.
My
Enjoyed it.
pleasure, everybody.
Bye.